Tell you the story at the end of it, but first I want to tell you what these chariots represent. Now, I hope maybe you shouldn't have been watching RTE, but if you were, you would have seen me with this chariot, and I've done it with John Creedon, and it's been repeated about 20 times. Some of you would have seen it, and I've been on twice with Neil Delamere doing Cuchulainn. And what this is the only, I'm the first person to have reproduced these chariots in 1,000 years. And the chariot was the icon of the Gael. It was the heroic self-image. Like you see the longships belonging to the Vikings, to Norse culture, representing their technology, the chariot, is to the Gael their heroic self-image. So Cuchulainn was a chariot warrior. You know, this is their technology, and they believed that nobody could do chariots better than them. And they were right, because you look at these chariots, you might think, some people say it to me, oh, looks like an old cart, because people have the Ben-Hur imagery in their head. They think of a chariot, they think of a little bucket on small little trolley wheels, and that was a racing chariot. They never went into battle. This, if you think of a modern horse-drawn vehicle, a lot of the features of a modern horse-drawn vehicle are in this Celtic chariot, this Irish chariot. So this is the successful design. Big wheels with springs and a platform you sit on. Now this would have been a two-man job. Cuchulainn's charioteer would be sitting here, and I'll show you something about this chariot, why it's so great. And Cuchulainn would be standing up behind her. But there's something about this chariot. A lot of the academics would say to you, well, look at this chariot. This just proves that the Irish knew nothing about chariots. Because look at that silly high shaft up there. No one has ever built a shaft up there. This is nonsense. They're making it up in their imagination. But I went and built this chariot exactly as the Gael portrayed it on the carvings. You know, I believe them. And this is the important thing. When you listen to the Celtic monks, when you listen to the tone, believe them, because you'll find it's worth it. What they're saying is true. So I built this just like this, and something wonderful happened. Like two ponies, Colleen and Misty. And Colleen, she's kind of a little bit awkward, but she's smart, which probably goes together, you know. And she's on the left-hand side here, and Misty, the other one, she's on the right-hand side. Now she's very calm, but she's not as smart as the other one. But the good thing is she doesn't get bothered by things. Celtic charioteers put their feet on the horse's rear. So when I'm driving along this, I got my feet on Misty's rear. And what that allows me to do is, it allows me to, someone else switch over and give her a break. It allows me to push against them when I'm braking. And it holds the whole thing together. But what we found, and this is the really interesting thing about this high shaft, is that when these ponies turned, they could swing their arses underneath this shaft, and they could spin around like this, and it's like an articulated lorry. And when they spin around, this wheel stays absolutely still, and the other one goes flying around. And no other chariot is as maneuverable and can do this kind of maneuvers. And that's the purpose of the High Cross. It's far from being a fantasy. It's actually a very a brilliant piece of design. So here we go. I'm going to talk to you a bit about the Irish horsemen as well. And this is later on, and this is more the flight of the Earls. And what we got here is, in the Book of the Deburka, there's a Conor horseman like this. And having showed you that the Celtic chariots were every bit as good as anything in the world, I'm going to talk to you about this design here. Because whenever you're talking about Gaelic things, it's always very different. Our culture was a clan culture which was very successful for a very long time because we weren't a civic society based on empire, towns and information highways and that kind of thing. We were all about the local. We lived in clans. We lived in forests. And as long as the forests were there, we could defend this land. Because when the Clancys were attacked by Bingham and Connacht, they didn't go to their castles, they went into the forests to protect themselves. And they knew they could fight from the forests and they couldn't be beaten because they could retreat into them and nobody could mount a campaign against them there. So this is a horseman from that time. And he's got a very long lance here, and that's what it's all about. He holds it over his shoulder and yeah, push it forward a bit there, let it go further. Yeah, and he's got a good reach there. But he's got a targe, very much a Gaelic Celtic style that's unmistakable. You know, this is a reproduction and targe, just like you'd see a Scottish targe from the Braveheart movies. Not too heavily armoured. Most guys just had one of these, bit of chainmail, because the way that the yellow glass, which were the mercenaries, fought, was they fought with these big axes, and battles were over. Combat was very swift and very deadly. So these axes would be coming down with this kind of an attack. These helmets are made to glance off the blows, and you receive them down onto these kind of pads, and you're protected in that way. So when he's advancing, he's got his shield in front of him. When he's retiring, he's got his shield behind him. So when the Normans came to Ireland, and this is all about the mixture of Gaelic and Norman culture, these castles are Hiberno-Norman. So the Normans were very successful at first. The way they used their cavalry and their saddles with stirrups gave them an advantage in a cavalry, in a formal battle. And that's how they won Dublin. But they didn't succeed around the country. And by the time of the Duburca, the Normans are no longer using Norman saddles. They're using the Gaelic saddles. Now why is that? Why is that they give up their successful, technically modern saddles to adopt the Gaelic saddle? And this is a Gaelic saddle what you have here. The reason is cattle raiding. The whole point of this setup is about cattle raiding. Now the King of France noted the King of England's Irish mercenaries, and he said, those Irish mercenaries, they go through the country and they gather everything and they tie all the valuables to their saddles, and they had no stirrups, so he could literally tie bags and bags of things, put his legs up on the bags and go away. So it was, and he called them pack saddles. So they were commercial saddles used in battle. And he said, no more than that, they tied anything else, like blankets, to the cows. And they drove the cows before them and took everything. So that was cattle raiding. You know, we could raid when the Normans came, they established themselves here, but it was no use to them because they couldn't manage the countryside. The Gaels would always cattle raid until eventually the Normans would be paying them money to stop. So the Normans themselves started cattle raiding too, until they eventually became very much the same as the Gaels themselves. And even though this is a Duburca from Connacht, even though he was probably 8 generations descended from a Norman. He was very much an Irishman and a Gael, and he led the Gaelic revival in the 16th and 15th century against the rest of Ireland, who was considered much more anglicised. So wasn't successful at the time. The Geraldines, the Lords of Kildare, defeated them, but it was an attempt to reassert clan culture. But I'll show you, stand up out of that now. I'll show you now, more important than anything, let's tie the forests and the fighting techniques together. This is why a Gaelic saddle is very, very useful for cattle raiding. You know, the Irishmen didn't carry tents with them. They cut down with their skiing here. This is just like a machete. Skiing, very useful bits of equipment. Cheap swords. They cut down like what you'd see modern survivalists make, just a shelter out of woven and thatched material. Now, under that, he'd take his saddle, put down the quilted pad. Maybe he'd use that as a bit of a pillow. There's lots of this, you can see it, more and more of it. And maybe he'd throw that down underneath him. And with his shaggy mantle here, you know, he's got a place to shelter. That keeps him in the country. It means he doesn't need to make it back to a castle. Anywhere he is, as soon as he disappears into the forest, he's gone. He ties up his horse and he can stay there for a week. You know, he can, if it's a mare, he can milk the horse and bleed it, cut the jugular away, and bleed and mix that milk and blood together and stay there where no one can find him. Now, even the way that the saddle is, when you go into the forest, the English writers say that they wrap their legs around the horse's neck and lean back like that and disappear into the trees like that. So there's nothing to catch going through the trees. Whereas all those the knights with their big pommels and their stirrups and all their equipment, their lances are going to catch on the trees and they're just not going to disappear. But the horses are bigger anyway, and so that's really why eventually the Hiberno-Normans ended up like this, using the Gaelic saddles, because they were cattle raiding too, because they saw no difference between themselves and the Gaels at a certain point. So let me think. I'm going to finish up with, no, I can talk, but I'll finish up telling you the story of Cormac O'Quillinan. Say a little bit more. See these? These are shaggy mantles, and this is iconic. When you see Hugh O'Neill, the pictures of the portraits of Hugh O'Neill, the very few ones that we have, Hugh O'Neill apparently owned or had some kind of possession of this castle at some point, and he lived here for 3 years. The great man Hugh O'Neill himself, who was fostered by the Donnelly people. Fosterage was an important part of it. My mother's a Donnelly, and my mother comes from Kildare. So there, we're tying it all together. She's from Rosebery up the way. She's gone now. But yeah, these clans were very, that's how they worked. And when you see Hugh O'Neill in the portrait, he's wearing one of these. And he could have the best of Tudor Elizabethan clothing, but he chose to be seen wearing this stuff because this is iconic. This says something about him and who he is and what he represents. This represents the man who lives in the forest. This is the cowboy, or almost the Red Indian of Ireland, you know, because he's totally at home in his environment. And this grey is very hard to see at night. And if I was to go into the trees, put the hood up and let the shaggy mantle fall down, I'd be pretty well camouflaged, you know. So this is the use of the shaggy mantle. You can fold it up on your shoulders if it's too hot. Just you know, it's like the Galway shawl. You still see it, and but the men would have worn it very much so too. So let me go back to the chariot, the story of the chariot, the age of saints and the age of the high crosses. And the great thing about the chariot is it is both a pre-Christian icon of Gaelic culture and a Christian icon of Gaelic culture. So you're seeing the unique Celtic Christian church, which unlike the more European style church, the classical church is not based on empire, it's not based on networks, it's based on the clan. And that's what Patrick did when he came to Ireland. He probably was manipulated, in my opinion, a little bit by the O'Neill, because the O'Neill had been fighting the Romans for 400 years. They had succeeded, and they were not going to let these Romans just come in and take over clan culture. So in Patrick, who says in his confession that he was in conflict with the Gaulish bishops. So a conflict is always something a Gaelic lord is going to take advantage of. And by having a man who is in conflict with someone else, he has more control. So the O'Neill centred their Christianity on the clan. And that's what worked not only for the Gaels, but also for the Vikings, for the Norse. They could see a model of Christianity that they could work with in their non-Romanized tribal kin groups. And that's why it was so successful. So you see also that the monks, both the Norse and the Gaelic monks, they are the first people to write down their pre-Christian traditions. So we know about Cuchulainn because an Irish monk wrote down the story. We know about the tales of Leif Erikson because Snorri, the Norse monk, wrote down the tales of the Norse. And what's important there is that they are people who do not see a break between the pre-Christian and the Christian. If you had said to an Irish monk, "Oh, you're a Christian now, you have no ownership of Cuchulainn," he would laugh in your face. Say, "Of course, Cuchulainn is my heritage." And this is what you see in Irish Christianity. You see that the Gentile tradition, the non-Jewish Gentile tradition, is very much the Celtic tradition, and it's a continuation, almost as if they saw their pre-Christianity as their Old Testament, as the importance of their heritage to their Christianity. So here we go a bit forward to the time of Cormac O'Quillinan, Bishop of Cashel, who owned this chariot. And you see the same conflict going on at this time, the conflict between the Irish church and the more European church. And Cormac O'Quillinan goes into battle. And this is what you see on the Athy cross. He's on his chariot and there's a little dog like these little dogs. And if I was to take that dog and put it up here, it would, in Cormac O'Quillinan's chariot, the dog is sitting up on the shaft, yapping at the horses to go faster. And so these are lovely captions on the high crosses. This is art, which is like cartoons, you know. And so into battle Cormac O'Quillinan goes, because what's happened, he has decided that there was a pilgrim called Adnan, I think his name was, and he came to Ireland and he forbade the Irish men to wear their long hair in their tribal styles. And this is the Irish style, shaved above the ears, a big long moustache, maybe not so much of a beard. So there's a conflict going on, because what's happened in Europe is that Charlemagne has gone up to the Saxons and he said, remember, he's just defended himself against the Islamic invasion, and convert or die starts to be a part of religion in Europe. So he's just defended himself against Islam, and now he is going up to the pagans and he's saying, ye Saxons, if you don't submit, it's a question of convert or die. And he massacred a lot of them up there. And you start to see the Vikings start to take a reaction against the Christian world, starting to raid down into Britain and Ireland. And so we've got a problem all of a sudden, because our bishops are appointed not by the Pope, but by our local king. And we don't pay money to Rome. In fact, we've got a bit of a problem, because we're not actually acknowledged by these guys who are saying convert or die. So Cormac O'Quillinan says, we better sort this out. I'm modernising the Irish church and making it formal, so it's right. So he went up to Connacht with an army and he took Clonmacnoise and he imposed the law of the clerics on the Connacht men and its taxes. And happy with that, he took on the Leinster men, so that this new formal Christianity would be established all the way across Ireland, and the Irish men would cut their hair and we'd all look right and classical and normal. But so that's the battle which was ahead. But the Leinster men said, no, we're not accepting that. And they called on the Ulstermen and they came down, and at Ballamugna in County Kildare they met. And there Cormac O'Quillinan fell. He was beheaded in the old Celtic style. And you see on the caption going home, after him losing the battle, along with 6,000 men, which is probably inflated, and fighting monks. You see the caption on the high cross of Cormac O'Quillinan, his body laid out over a pony, his head in a bag on the end of a rod, with a man walking in front of the pony, and the very last thing to follow the little procession is Cormac O'Quillinan's little dog, following after his slain master. And the beauty of that little bit of art and the story in just carved stone is such a wonderful thing in the high crosses. But that's the story of Cormac O'Quillinan, 907 AD. But the beautiful thing about it was that us kin-based clansmen of Ireland Christian men got to keep our long hair for another 200 or 300 years until the establishment of the Normans and that whole era. But I want to finish by saying one thing to you, and if anybody's telling me wind it up, I'll wind it up quick, but I have to tell you this one. The bit of, I'm going to get back up on the chariot for this. The bit of Irish history that we hear least of, and the bit that I'd like to tell you the most of, is 9 of the 9 hostages. So these chariots, why we took these chariots on as our icon of our culture. There are 6 chariots on the high crosses of Ireland. The tone is full of them. So this was a contrast with the Roman world. You can see we're always trying to compare ourselves to some degree to the classical world, who are sometimes our friends, sometimes our enemies, but we are not civic people. We are not empire people, we're clan-based people. And this piece of civilization, this is the image of our culture and our identity. You know, And this is our technology that we do so well. So Conor was a chariot warrior, and at a time when the Roman world, well, later on Niall of the Nine Hostages was at a time when the Roman world had collapsed. And this is a bit of Irish history that we hear the least of. And this is what I want to talk about. Did you ever hear of Athy, son of Fearcraft, King of all Ireland and King of the world? You didn't, because nobody told it to you. Athy, son of Fearcraft, was a descendant of Niall of the Nine Hostages. And Irish kings at this time didn't die fighting in Ireland. They didn't even die fighting in Britain. They died fighting in Gaul, and Athy died crossing the Alps. So why haven't we heard about these kings? Why haven't we heard of Murdoch MacAirca, who was a British king? He was an Irish king who had a kingdom in Britain, who established his kingdom against the Franks in 535 AD, according to the Irish chroniclers. It's because we don't know, or we're not taught about the Gaelic resurgence, the Celtic resurgence of the 4th and 5th century following the fall of Rome. Niall of the Nine Hostages who were the Nine Hostages? They were his alliance that he went to Gaul with, because at this time the Visigoths and the Franks were fighting for control of the whole of Europe, and the only part of Europe that doesn't change hands is Western Gaul, Britain and Ireland, because they're under the control of this alliance. So who was Niall of the Nine Hostages? His hostages were the 4 kingdoms of Ireland, the Picts, the Britons, the Saxons, the Franks and the Gauls. And that's the alliance they're fighting with in France. And if you go into the one great bit of internet, which is the University of Cork's Celt website, where they've translated all the ancient Irish texts into English so we can read them. And they tell a story that you wouldn't recognise. Because if you believe that the Saxons invaded Britain following the Romans' exit, you won't understand this story. Because it's a completely different story to what Oxford and Cambridge tells us. In fact, it's actually a completely different story to what the Saxon Chronicles tell us, because the Saxon Chronicles tell us that the Saxons weren't even in Britain when the Romans left, that they didn't even arrive till 50 years after they've gone, that they didn't have any control to any significant degree in southern Britain till 200 years after they left, that they only took control of England about 900 AD. So why does Oxford and Cambridge try to promote that narrative of something which even the Saxons say isn't true? It's because they want to well, let's say, I won't say why, I'll say it makes it very difficult for us to project the Irish narrative onto that time. The Irish narrative is that the Irish had kingdoms in Britain, that they had an alliances where the Britons were their under-kings, where they were going into Gaul and taking back control of Western Europe, because Celtic culture was all the way from Turkey to Ireland before the Romans arrived. When the Britons and the Gauls became Romanized, they forgot their chariot culture. They didn't drive chariots anymore. It was only the Scots and the Irish that did it, because we weren't under Roman control. So what you see when Rome falls is that a re-Celticization of this part of the world. that, and this is a sad thing, when empire takes over a place, it leaves the people without power. It leaves them without their structures of organisation. You know, and we, as the Irish, have had times when we didn't have structure, but we were able to build on the clan culture. Even the parish culture, we were able to build up our power. And clan culture was also all of a sudden very powerful now the Romans had left. You know, we could pull together our resources and make armies, dominate and take over other places, bring them into our system, and they would be protected within it. And we would take control and have some measure of civilization. So, if I was to leave you with anything today, it is that story. The story, and I think that we need to tell these stories. The stories of Cuchulainn. The reason, you probably all know what a Viking looks like. You probably know what a Roman soldier looks like. You know what a redcoat looks like. But you don't know what an Irish cavalryman looks like, because you haven't seen this imagery before. You know, but there they are. There he is. You know, you don't see the imagery of the Gael even on Irish TV. We don't tell the story. Where is the movie of Cuchulainn? Where is the movie of St. Patrick? Where is the story of Niall of the Nine Hostages? Where's the story of Brian Boru? Hugh O'Neill? You know, Owen Rowan O'Neill. A better man than Braveheart. Won more battles against superior forces than William Wallace. You know, these are great stories which we have been afraid to take hold of. And I believe it's because we are afraid to challenge the narrative. The narrative of that all civilization comes from the East. So these are things that I would like to see us take ahead, as perhaps we do get resources and control, and we do promote our own culture and identity. These are things we have to do to create strength and to create the kind of bodies which will carry us forward. So I think I'll finish up on that. I don't think there's a whole lot more I can say, but thanks very much for listening.
Well done, well done. Bravo, bravo. Woohoo.
We made a good decision not to bring the ponies today, not to see this charging around with Fergal up on the back of Cuchulainn and me driving them around the front. Apart from that, when I got up today, one of the ponies was actually lame. So there was nothing we could. It was meant to be, So thanks very much.
Bring them next time.
About this, I'll talk to you privately. Well done, guys. Thanks for listening.
Well, we got our minstrels. We had a magician earlier on. Well, how's it going?
How did you get up?
I came on the bus, a bus and a train. The only thing I was missing was a plane. So here we are at Phelan a Fellacoin, the feast, the butterfly party, because we're coming out of Cocoon. Do you want to be on? No, it's going out that way. It's going out that way.
It's been a great day so far.
Right, so we'll sign off. That was a great performance, a great presentation by Gael Force Reilly.
Yeah, sure.
We're here in Athy, the West Castle in Athy, celebrating the end of Cocooning. Well,
Let's start off this one. It's from
the end of summer, I suppose, and the awakening.